Well, again, we come back to this whole idea of deterministic, right? And I think that that would be at odds with agency. Would you agree? Like these things are kind of
Well,
mutually exclusive, right?
not really. I mean, like it just depends on what you think free will is. I think that libertarian free will is impossible. I don't understand how it could work,
What
but
does they mean by
I
agent?
get I
Not
get understand the
determinate.
intuition that libertarians have about like being able to choose otherwise. Sure. Um,
I look at this term up because I keep hearing it, libertarian free will. And look, full disclosure, I'm not sure how libertarian our will truly is, or how free, or how libertarian our free will is, or how free that will is.
I'll just tell you. So,
Um,
libertarian free will is incompatibilism, and what that says is that free will is incompatible with determinism. So, hard determinists, right, are also incompatibilists. They say there is no free will because determinism is true. Libertarians say um, free will is incompatible with determinism, but determinism is false. So we have libertarian free will. And libertarian free will is the idea that the principle of alternative possibilities, that principle is fulfilled by minds at least some of the time, which just says that, like, upon making a choice, you could choose either A or B. You're not constrained to one choice. And then compatibilism, which the Calvinists believe that free will is compatible with determinism. And they give arguments through like Harry Frankfurt cases. So you're probably a libertarian based on what you're saying.
um, I guess there's okay. So I don't know if I'm a libertarian, if I believe in libertarian free will, because that does seem to be at odds with certain entailments of my worldview. So I don't think that I could claim libertarian free will as one of my positions. I just looked up the difference between libertarian free will versus free will itself, like as in a broader term. Tell me if you think that this is accurate. That free will, in the broad sense, generally means the capacity to choose or act freely, but does not necessarily imply indeterminism. It can include both compatibilist and libertarian perspectives. Then compatibilist free will asserts that genuine choice can coexist with determinism, emphasizing voluntary actions aligning with one's desires or internal state. Whereas libertarian free will is more of a narrow category, specifically holds that true freedom requires indeterminism, meaning choice must fundamentally be open and not causally determined.
Yeah, that's what I just said. That's exactly what I
Okay.
just. Yeah.
Yeah, I would probably align closer with compatibilist free will because I do believe that
Well,
certain
that's
things
but
are
compatibilism is determinism, dude.
well, no, no,
That's why it's
no.
called compatibilism.
Compatibilism is called compatibilism because it's saying that determinism doesn't negate free will. So like things having causes doesn't mean you can't have free will.
Yeah, it's you're accepting
Yeah.
determinism. And the libertarian free will is like, if, think if you rewinded the universe 10 minutes, do you think that you could have argued differently? Do you believe that this, like the conversation you just had, do you believe that you could have argued any differently than the exact way that you did? If you think that you could have, then you believe that that's libertarian free will. I just think about rewinding the universe and that you could have done differently. That you're not simply being acted upon other atoms, including things that affect your brain and make you say things, this and that. Yeah. Do you think that you could have
Okay.
argued any differently if you rewinded the universe 5 minutes?
And in your mind would need to be the source of that difference between choosing A or B. So, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but it's important.
Okay. Let me see if this fits with the way you understand things, Jeff, to see if we can come to a
Well, what do you think? I mean, he asked you a question to figure out if you're a
oh,
libertarian. It's not like a quiz show. It's
oh,
just
gotcha. I'm sorry. I must have missed it. I'm down to one earbud. My other one's charging. Can you repeat the question? I'll try to listen closer this time. I apologize.
I'll just repeat it. He wants to ask you, like, look, is it the case that you could have chosen cereal over coffee, like uh, when you had breakfast this morning, or were you fixed?
Yeah.
Is your mind committed to always choosing coffee?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a number of breakfast options available at my disposal, and this morning I chose donuts. I could have chosen any number one of those options, and I chose what I chose based off of specific reasons, right? I reasoned myself into the donuts because, well, the donuts are going to get stale if I don't eat them sooner. So I chose the donuts over the
Yeah, but
cereal,
but
which won't get
Y-
stale as quickly.
but
Yeah.
you would have all those reasons in the stock in your mind, right? but could you have chosen cereal over the coffee or vice versa, whatever, even though
Yeah,
your
I
mind is
very
in the
easily
exact
could have.
state?
Yeah, I very easily could have. Yeah,
Well,
why not? Why
then,
couldn't I?
I think
then
what it,
okay, then that's libertarian.
Well,
okay.
hold on. No, I think that no, here, let me see if I can draw a distinction between compatibilism and determinism. I think that they're very closely linked, but I think that there are
No, no,
subtle
no, dude.
differences.
They're called compatibilism because it's compatible with determinism.
It's called compatibilism because it's compatible with determinism and free will. There's
No, no, no.
this the in between.
Compatibilism is the theory of free will. Libertarian free will is another theory of free will. Hard
Okay, so why
determinism
am I getting
is like an
why am I
unlimitedism.
getting why okay, that's what you say, but I'm reading something very
Mhm.
differently here that really more accurately reflects my position.
But
So I
what
mean you
you
can
read
call
was
me
what I
whatever you
said.
want. Okay, well hold on. No, compatibilism is not the same as determinism, though they are closely related. Determinism states that every event, action, and decision is caused by prior events, such that everything is fixed by preceding conditions and laws of nature. Under determinism, there are no genuine alternative
Yeah,
possibilities.
that's hard
Whereas,
determinism. That's
okay,
incompatibilism. Mhm.
then compatibilism holds that free will is compatible with determinism.
Yeah,
Compatibilists
exactly.
argue
Yeah.
that even if actions are determined by a prior cause, a choice can still be considered free if it's consistent with an agent's internal motivations, desires, or character.
Yes, see the difference there because compatibilists are compatible. They say free will is compatible with determinism. Incompatibilists, right, like hard determinists or libertarians, say free will is incompatible with determinism. So you can be a hard determinist. That's probably what they meant there. They shouldn't have just said determinist. A hard determinist are incompatibilist that says that our minds are determined, and that's not compatible with free will. So we don't have free will. And libertarians say, I agree, free will is not compatible with determinism, but we do have free will. Why? Because our mind isn't determined.
So we're just saying determinism equals compatibilism, but you're drawing the distinction between hard determinism and determinism. And I'm drawing the
Uh,
distinction between determinism and free will or libertarian free will with the middle ground of compatibilism. We're basically saying the same thing. We're just using two different words to describe the middle ground, it seems.
as long as you know that if you're a compatibilist, I mean, technically you don't have to think minds are determined, but if you're a compatibilist, you think that if minds were determined, then they would have free will. That's just what it means.
Uh, okay. I think I really kind of resonate with this that thus compatibilism accepts determinism, but asserts that determinism does not negate freedom or moral
Exactly.
responsibility. And that last bit, that moral responsibility line, I think that's why earlier in the conversation I alluded to that very concept when I mentioned good versus evil, right?
But you were
Because I
saying
think that is the
mine couldn't be
verse.
determined. Now you're saying they could be. So like, which
Wait,
is it?
hold on, what?
I
No,
thought
I
you were
didn't say
saying
that they
before that
couldn't.
you. Oh, I thought you said minds were not determined. Or did I just
Well,
misunderstand you?
not
I think
solely
yeah, I
deterministic.
think he
I think
means
that's the
I was gonna say I think he means hard determinist. Like he does he
yeah,
would say mine's not hard deterministic. I would
Well,
yes,
hard
yes.
determinism is just your view about whether or not you have free will on determinism. They're the
yeah.
exact same mind. You're just like disagreeing whether or not that
Yeah.
mind, which is determined, has free will. That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing different about the metaphysics going on there.
All right. So I may or may not have an example that might hopefully make Icon kind of understand the difference better. So like I have some friends and I think they hold an idea of free will. I think it sounds like this compatibilist view. Essentially, kind of like we were talking, you picked the donut this morning, right? As opposed to like the coffee or cereal or something, and you said you had reasons for that. All right, we
Hmm.
would both agree you made a decision based on those reasons, and that if we would have rewinded reality those 30 seconds before you made the decision, those reasons would still remain the same, and you would still make the decision to eat the donut.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. So that's the determined part because your reasons won't change. But the way it's compatibilist is that we say, well, I seemed to exercise a will to choose the donut, even though it was based on these determined reasons. So I'm going to call it free will because I am still making the choice, despite it being motivated by reasons. So that's the compatibilist thing, is that you're saying the very fact that I made the choice at all is my free will. And now that will might be limited in one way or another, or I might only have the two avenues, or reason compels me to go this route as opposed to another one, but that's still my will freely choosing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that that's accurate. And look, maybe I just don't understand these terms with 100% philosophical accuracy, right? That's possible. And if that's the
Yeah,
case,
that
I'll
was a
fully
good
make up.
example.
I got no problem. Yeah, I think
That
that
was
was a
better than like
perfectly
my
good example.
example. But like,
Yeah,
if you
that's
agree with that, then you don't think minds need to be that you don't think that minds can't be determined. And I thought you said that minds couldn't be determined early on.
no, that's not what I said. That's the
Oh.
fundamental hang up that we're having. I'm saying there it's not solely determined. It's not solely determined or here,
Yeah,
I'll
it's
just share the definition
like
again. I
okay.
think this might help.
I mean, they're either determined or they aren't.
Well, I think he's taking a more, what do you call it, like a practical or an intuitive approach, where he's saying like, well, it appears to be that I have a choice, so I'm gonna take it on appearance and claim that it's a free choice, even though like reasonably we can say that it seems determined for him to make this choice. It's like a practical. It sounds like an intuitive stance, like he's saying because it feels like, because I guess the qualia of making the choice. Um, then I'm going to call it free. That's what it sounds like to me, and I could be wrong on that.
Okay, so I would say that it is distinguished from non-mind by its ability to engage in directed cognition rather than being governed solely by deterministic laws or stochastic process. Minds can manifest in various forms, but they must exhibit a degree of autonomy in generating and responding to information beyond the reaction to just material or external stimuli.
So, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting your conversation, Jeff, but like going back to the donut example, you explained again that you had reasons for choosing that donut. Would you agree
Mm-hmm.
that that was like at least your method of choosing the donut was through reason, and that that was determined? Like those reasons couldn't have somehow short circuited if you went back 5 minutes and made a different route. It would have ended in the same determination.
Well, the reasons wouldn't have changed,
Right.
right? Because the reasons are the reasons.
Right.
My engagement with those reasons and whether or not to use those reasons to determine my choice, that's variable,
Well,
right?
sure, and that'll vary on future instances, sure, because the data is different. But in that particular instance that you made the determination to pick donut, and this is what it is, because we're trying to create the exact same scenario. Your mind is in the same state. You have the same previous knowledge. Everything in time. You're at time one, and then time two is when you pick the donut. We're going back to time one, where everything that was all the conditions are the same as the previous time one. It's like 1.1 if you want to call it, or 1b as opposed to 1a. Time 1b, or actually we're going back to time 1a, and then you make another choice to go to the donut. Like, would you? I think I might have lost myself here. Uh, you have all the same reasons. Everything was the same. Are those same reasons going to somehow convince you to not pick the donut in that same scenario? And I apologize if I lost you.
No, sure. If I determine or think to myself, well, the donuts are from yesterday. They might already be kind of stale. I'm not at the location of the donut right now, and I'm hungry right now. So, regardless of my prior reasons for, hey, I should choose donut, I might decide those reasons aren't so great, and I'm hungry now, and I don't want to X, Y, Z, and like circle
Right.
back to where I started. All these other things, I can decide spontaneously. Like the reason I decided donut, I was at the gas station grabbing a cup of coffee and some smokes, and I saw donuts. And I was like, ooh, donut, right? And I could have very easily bought that donut, but I
Right.
decided, I don't want to spend the extra couple of bucks. So I'll just stop back by the house because I'm headed that way anyway, and I'll grab the donuts that I already have because they might go stale if I don't, or they might already be stale. That's a risk I'm
Right.
willing to take.
Right.
I don't
But
see how this was determined
well,
because I made the decision.
right. So what I'm saying, the determined part are all of the reasons. Because could you use those same exact reasons and your same determinations of those reasons and then come to a different conclusion? Oh, the donut was stale. Oh, and all of this, and exactly everything you said to reason to not pick the donut, and then say, so I should pick the donut.
I could have just said, you know what? I could have decided then at the gas station, don't buy these donuts. You already have donuts. That's a fiscally responsible thing to do. And the donuts that
Right.
you already have might go bad, but I could have gone and made the decision to leave the gas station And instead of stop back by the house to grab said donuts, which was a good decision, by the way, they were delicious. I could have just kept right on
Right.
driving and said, yeah, fuck
Right.
a donut. I don't need a donut. I'll grab lunch.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, I guess in this scenario, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get you to use the same reasons in the example. The idea is you're using the same determinations. I'm trying to say that the reasoning that you're using follows a necessary conclusion, right? It's like because of my previous experience or whatever. Let me try to say all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? So that's a necessary determination. That's a factually, it's a factual statement. And
Yeah,
it's a sound valid
that's
it's a sound
deductive.
valid right sound valid deductive argument. Could I ever in that determination at the end say therefore Socrates is not mortal? Would that
No.
right? So it's determined in a sense of if the premises are true, it leads to a certain conclusion, and I cannot reason through these conclusions to a different or to these premises to a different conclusion. And that's what I'm trying to do with the donut example. You were given these reasons which you were
Mhm.
going to determine because you have the values set at again time 1. All of your previous experience is set. So the reason, you started with like, "Oh, hey, this donut looks
Okay,
really
let me
good."
put it this way.
Sure, go ahead.
I get what you're saying. I do. I get it. Trust me.
Yeah, go for
But
it.
what I'm saying, however, is I could have sat there in my vehicle outside of the gas station mulling over this existential donut crisis, right?
Mhm.
And I could have just gotten frustrated. Like, do I get the donut? Do I not get the donut? Do I stop and get the other
Right.
donuts, or do I not stop and get the other
Right.
donuts? Do I get both sets of donuts so that I can take a bite of each and determine which donut I want in this moment in time? Or do I just say, fuck it,
Yeah.
donuts,
Yeah.
and go on about
No,
my day?
no, I hear what you're saying. Here's all the realm of possible options that you could have done that are philosophically possible. Philosophically, you could have done these many decisions in the donut. But I think we would all agree that realistically, given any scenario, you don't have a philosophically, your choices are not limited philosophically. It's limited by uh, by more circumstances, more variables, whatever. Like your sense of taste, it makes it so that you don't like lemon donuts. So you're just not going to pick lemon donut without a reason to pick lemon donut as an example. So like if in a situation where no reason to give you a lemon donut and you've never liked a lemon donut ever in your life, even though you've had it before, and you choose and for some reason you pick a lemon donut out of nowhere, we would think that's kind of, like why would you do that? There seems to be no reason for that. And it's not like we make choices that go against our reasons. It's not like we reason something and then come to the opposite conclusion, right? Unless we have a reason for it. That's kind of what I'm saying. You're making it a choice based on these reasons. And what I'm saying is if we're in the same scenario, whatever reasons happen to come to your mind, again, if we rewind, will be the same reasons that come to your mind. And right, you couldn't control what reasons came to your mind when you were picking that donut. They just popped into your head, and then your cravings and your body things. So those are all things that I'm trying to say are the determined bit. There are reasons. You have justifications that get you to your conclusion. That's
Hmm.
that's that's the determination because it makes no sense for you to make a logical, determined statement and then reason for its negative or something like that. It's like again, like the Socrates
Oh,
is
and if
man.
that's all that's being said here, that the reasons are the reasons, I think I pretty clearly said that,
Yeah, but
a little while ago when I said the reasons are what they are,
right, right.
and
Well, all
those don't change. Sure,
yeah,
that's fine. I can
yeah,
accept that.
and that's all I'm saying is that you're making determinations based on those. So based on the reasons that you have, it comes to, at least in this case, because you're given the information that doesn't change, it will necessarily come to a conclusion, which in this case was you got the donut. Philosophically possible, you could have determined that you didn't get the donut, but in this case, you did. And all I'm saying is if you rewind it and play it back, you will necessarily, I would say, always pick the donut. It's like watching a movie, rewind it. The guy is never going to drop the girl and run away. He gets the girl at the end of the movie.
I got
It'll
you.
that's
I
that's
got
all
you.
that's all I'm saying. And then
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and then it sounds like you're like it sounds like a compatibilist view is to say that, like, oh, even though the reasons are determined, it will always be that way. If I hit rewind and hit play, the same scene is going to happen, even though philosophically the actor in the movie could have done any number of actions, almost infinitely number of actions. He'll still do the same actions because uh, all the premises and everything are the same as before. But you're just saying that, like, oh, I make that decision, and then as an agent, I'm going to say that's the free will part. But all I'm trying to say is the determined part is the reasons and the fact that they were there and that they will necessarily come to whatever determination you've concluded. Like, you could not have
The
come to a different
yeah.
determination. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's the
that
determined
makes
part.
that makes sense. I mean, in retrospect, I would agree. You don't come to a different conclusion. That would be like the ones and zeros on a DVD magically
Yeah.
changing. And it was the rewind and replay thing that got. So that was a perfect analogy. That was perfect, actually.
Thank you.
And in that sense, I would agree that the reasons are determined, right? Um,
Yes. Yeah. And
but I
that's
think that
and
in the moment, right, we don't have this advantage of looking back at it.
exactly.
So
Exactly. Well, that's the
in
thing. It's determined in that, like, you can't change those parameters. So that's all he's saying. That's all Jeff, I think, was trying to say. And then, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. But you just have these factors that come to a necessary
That's right.
conclusion. Yeah, you will necessarily come to that conclusion, right? And then if you want to do a compatibilist view and say, like, well, even if it necessarily comes to the conclusion, that's the part that's determined. That's what Jeff was trying to say when it's determined. It's not hard determined in the sense that you don't have free will, although there are definitely plenty of hard determinists that will say that compatibilism doesn't make sense. But if you want to take a compatibilist view, you say, okay, I will necessarily make this decision. Like, I don't have the choice to reason differently, but I am making a choice as an agent. So it's like calling it free will in, like, a sense of I feel like I'm making a choice. It doesn't feel like I'm an automaton. So it feels like free will. So if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it feels like a duck, then I'm going to call it a duck in a sense is what my understanding of the compatibilist view is. It just feels like free will. I'll call it free will.